Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning back into the channel. Really appreciate you being here. You might have noticed some of my videos, actually not some, all my videos have been in one spot in the house, so I figured I'd bring it into Jesse's kitchen here. So, welcome to Jesse's kitchen, and we're going to get into the content for today. Just before we do that, I want to give a shout out to two of my viewers, Steve, Chelsea. Really appreciate you guys enjoying the content, watching the videos, leaving comments. Chelsea, good luck to you this coming week. Steve, it's going to be coming pretty soon. Keep yourself trim, fit, get ready for the academy. You're going to have a great time. Enjoy the videos. I really hope that they're shedding some light for everybody who's watching them. And so far, I've accomplished one of the two goals that I set out when I started this channel. First was entertainment. The second one was helping anybody who's going to be embarking on this career for what they could be expecting. So it looks like I'm slowly accomplishing that. Our last video, we left off with my first day at the Styles unit as a academy graduate. I had forgotten what we were called when you were in between the academy and being a CO. Again, acronym OJT, on the job training. That's what we were referred to when we were in our training program when we got to our new units. So we weren't cadets anymore. We weren't, quote, fully fledged corrections officers, even though we were paid as such. We were OJT. We may as well have had a sign attached to us. There should even be, that's a good one right there that TDCJ should do. There should be some kind of a pin or an insignia so everybody could tell that you're OJT. I also, for the last couple of videos, couldn't remember the name of my field training officer, FTO. Her name was Officer Lewis. From now on, she'll be referred to Officer Lewis. She was a CO5, the highest rank you can make as corrections officer, and a wonderful field training officer. She knew all aspects about the job. She was really phenomenal. I believe she's retired by now. If she's not, I really hope that she's still in that position. So, what we're going to talk about today is what happens after you graduate and you report to your unit. You're in the OJT program. OJT is going to differ from unit to unit. It's going to depend on if you're at a state jail, if you're at a maximum security facility. It just depends. It's going to be whatever the warden has established for the training program. Typically, it's between 2 to 3 weeks. I think some units might even do 1 week. That's a little bit fast. It just depends on the program that's established by the administrators. At the Styles unit, OJT was 3 weeks. Now, some of the things that differ in being on OJT and being on shift, we didn't report to the shift room and report to our sergeant or our lieutenant and get assigned to a building, a picket, a tower, a pod, a dorm. We didn't fall into that structure yet. When we got to work, we would go to, like we talked about in the previous video, we would go to the visitation room and wait for Miss Lewis to get there. You're going to find when you're working there, we typically call each other Mr. and Miss. I'm not sure where it stems from. It just kind of happens that way. Officer, boss, boss man, boss lady, Mr. Carter, Miss Lewis. Those are all terms that you would be called by each other as well as by offenders. Offenders had a lot of other names for us as well. I can't get into them here on YouTube. You can use your imagination. So we would get to the visitation room and wait for Miss Lewis to get there. When we saw her walk down the corridor, she'd look over, glance at us, kind of motion, and then we'd get up, go into her office, and she would ask us what we had done in the previous day, what we had seen, where we had been assigned to. When I say assigned to, I don't mean as a CO. I mean as OJT, you would shadow other corrections officers. Shadowing meaning you're right by their side the whole time, taking instruction from them. So we'd meet at her office, and we would go over where we had been the previous day so we didn't get double assigned to it. There were all different places to go to and see throughout the facility. Parts of the day would be spent in the chow hall, working with the food service managers, seeing how the offenders cooked and prepared the food, how it was served, how to check for contraband. We would go to the laundry facility. Laundry was where uniforms would get dropped off by COs to get pressed and ironed by the inmates, offenders, same thing. I'm using the terms intermittently. It was also offender laundry. Offenders at TDCJ wear all white. There's a white shirt, a white pair of pants, white socks. That's one thing I didn't cover with the uniform. As a CO, you will wear black socks. Do not show up to pat down in the morning and take your boots off and have a white pair of socks on. They're going to tell you to turn right around and leave. And that's going to make you late for work, and it's not an excuse that you had on the wrong kind of socks. So wear black socks. It's also a security risk. If for some reason an offender happens to take a CO hostage and switch uniforms, hopefully the offender won't think to take the socks, and white socks on a CO is a sign that there's been a hostage situation or a uniform switch out. So it is there for a purpose. So we would see these different parts of the unit, work with these individuals, and as well, we would work in different buildings, different dorms, pickets, towers. I want to say we would spend anywhere from 2 hours or so each one, just kind of getting a good general exposure of the different locations throughout the unit. Plus, it was a way for the COs to see who the new, not cadets, who the new OJTs were coming in, and start feeling us out. What were our attitudes like? Were we positive? Were we negative? Did we side toward general population, segregation, things like that? Everything that you're doing as a new employee of TDCJ, especially in your first couple of days at your unit, it's a total feel out process. The inmates are getting to know you. They watch every single thing that we do. Everything. Do you go up a flight of stairs with your left foot or your right foot? Do you open a door with your left hand or your right hand? Everything. How do you start your conversations off? It's all being watched. So keep that in mind whenever you get to your new unit. Like I say, it lasted around about 2 to 3 weeks, give or take. The schedule, it wasn't bad. We had to be there by 8. I don't mean 8 o'clock in the parking lot. I mean sitting in your seat ready for Miss Lewis to arrive at 08. If you got to get to the unit at 7:30 to get there on time, do that. We had a saying in TDCJ, and it applies to a lot of other industries. If you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. You got to give yourself enough time to be ready to go, get yourself started. So we also had a couple of different other introductions. We met with the sergeant that was the security threat group specialist, and he showed us slides and gave us training about gang identification, tattoos, brands, marks, different kinds of weapons that they would make, code words that they would speak. We met with the use of force manager. Use of force manager was one that if you got into an altercation with an inmate, it was going to be reviewed. If there was camera footage of it, it was going to be reviewed to make sure that excessive force wasn't used on the part of the officer. An offender had no excessive force. If an offender raised a hand to a CO, that was use of force. Whatever they did from there, it was all the same thing. However, as corrections officers, you have to watch the force that you use, it can't be excessive toward an inmate. An example would be you're standing, an offender walks past you and says something despairingly. If you slap him in the back of the head, that's excessive force. It didn't meet the criteria. Likewise, you're in the same situation, an offender is walking past you, turns, grabs you in a bear hug. Now at that point, use of force is on. Saying, hey, let go of me, it's probably not going to get the job done. So you got to protect yourself from that. What else? What was it called? There was a CO that was assigned to any kind of maintenance requests that were done. Phone doesn't work in B picket, lights out in A pod, stair has fallen through in 3 building, 2nd floor, things like that. This was the maintenance officer who would get these requests. There were forms that you would fill out and you would have those submitted. Those would go to her. She had a specific offender who worked with her that would put those in the system, and that's what would trigger the maintenance supervisors to go to these different facilities to work on these discrepancies throughout the unit. So we got to work with that. Another big one that we were exposed to in OJT, and I'm sure everyone at every unit is going to deal with it, mailroom. Offender mail. Nowadays we've gotten to where email so much is more digitally electronic. I would venture to say the prison system probably has the highest amount of paper mail traffic in any of the industries. Everything from magazine subscriptions to newspapers to letters from family, friends. Offenders were prohibited from communicating with each other. Stevie Joe in Gen Pop was prohibited from sending a letter to Tommy Jones over in A dorm. I'm just using examples. Offenders couldn't communicate officially with each other that way. However, they did find ways. Johnny Bear writes home to Tommy. Tommy sends a letter to Tom, and now they're communicating with each other through their outside sources. It's just another form of offender manipulation. So what the OJT individuals would do would go in the mailroom. There were mail clerks, that was their official title, mailroom clerk. They worked in the mailroom. Their job was to scan this mail. It had to be processed. Which dorm is it going to? Which offender is it going to? The letter was opened. The stamp was removed. Stamp was removed because contraband could be put in between the letter and the stamp. You had to check the letter. You couldn't read everything. It was just too much print. You scanned it as quick as you could, see if there were any code words that you recognized from your class with the security threat group sergeant, or was there any contraband. Nudity pictures were allowed with certain guidelines. You could see the top, you couldn't see anything from the bottom. None of that. That went for male and female pictures. There was a big supply of that. So get ready to see pictures of family members, friends, cutouts of magazines, all that goes in there. I don't remember how many hours a day we would do that. We would work in mailroom. Property inventory. We'd go into that as well. You'd work with whichever corrections officer worked in offender inventory. When they went from one unit to the next, their property was all bagged up. It was itemized, added to the bag itself, and shipped with the offender. General population offender would typically bring their own property with them. Segregation offender? No. Seg offenders, it went to a property room, it was tagged, inventoried. When it was time for the offender to receive their property, it had to be checked through. It was checked at the previous facility, It gets checked at the facility that it goes to. That previous facility might have missed some form of contraband, or they might have been allowed something at the facility that they're not allowed at this particular facility. Some facilities would allow them to bring the plastic fan with them. Other facilities, no go. It was considered a fire hazard because of them using the plug to make stingers. Stinger is a fender contraband item that they use to heat things up. So it just depended on the protocol at the particular facility. Let's see, what else in OJT? As OJT, you couldn't be assigned to work a building by yourself. When we went to the different individual buildings, you would report to whichever CO was assigned to it, introduce yourself. They would give you a brief rundown of the procedures that went on, and then you would work with that officer. You had to be around them at some point, not necessarily shoulder to shoulder, but you always had to have eyesight and earsight of that officer. If for some reason you got separated, you had to do everything that you could to get back with that officer. You weren't allowed to be out around on yourself. That was a liability purpose for TDCJ, plus it was just dangerous. A brand new CO who doesn't know what they're doing could easily be manipulated by these offenders and very much so taken advantage of. So it was for the protection of the new employee, give you some time to learn what's what. You learn what you learn in the academy, and I'll guarantee you your first 3 to 4 days at the unit, you're going to learn more there than you ever did at the academy. Academy teaches policies, procedure, paperwork. The unit, they teach you how offenders are. And it's a lot different on paper than it is actually physically dealing with one of these individuals. Once you finished up your OJT process, that's when you would put in what type of assignment that you wanted. Do you want day shift? Do you want night shift? Do you want to work general population? Do you want to work administrative segregation? At that point, you've met the supervisors of day and night shifts of Gen Pop and Seg. Typically, they were captains. Remember, our pin-on insignia, captains wore 2 bars, lieutenants wore 1, sergeants 3 stripes, as well as sewn on the sleeves. You had met them. If for some reason they didn't have a good feeling about you, they might put in a word to Miss Lewis that, I don't want this individual on my shift. Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't privy to any of that information. I'm going to go ahead and close here with this video. The next video that we talk about will wrap up the rest of the OJT process, the shift that I got assigned to, and in the video after that, we're going to talk about the first fight that I had, first use of force that I was exposed to at the unit. It didn't take long. Spoiler alert, day 2. It happens fast in these units. Folks, thanks for checking out this content. I really appreciate it. Again, welcome to my kitchen. If you liked the video, tell me what you did like. If you didn't, tell me what you didn't like. If you want to see anything else into it, comment on that down below, and I'll see everyone in the next video. Hope everyone's having a great weekend. Happy 4th of July. Take care of yourselves.